Okay, I guess we have a friend joining us. This is my roommate's cat. If you see little ears poking over the desk, that is her. She's going to be joining us. Would you like to learn about tarot cards too, ma'am? Hello and welcome back to my channel, and if you are new here, I'm normally actually reading these cards and doing collective readings and things of that nature, but today we're going to be talking about what even is tarot, where did it come from, and how do people even use it? This is going to be a video for anyone who has no idea what tarot cards are, or if you are just trying to get into tarot and what you should even do with these cards and how to use them and where they came from. If you've seen tarot cards in a video game or a movie and you're just really curious about them, this video is also for you. So to understand the tarot deck, we have to go back all the way to 9th century Tang Dynasty. See, in Tang Dynasty in China, they were experimenting with different paper making techniques, and one of them was called wood blocking, where we essentially get a thicker, more flexible card. This is what invented cardstock, you could say. And during this time, there was a lot of different myths and legends of who actually wanted a sort of playing card game as a game to play, because cards weren't just made and then there's a 52 card deck like instantly. There was different amounts of decks with different types of cards and amount of cards as well. Sometimes cards were used in conjunction with dice, and sometimes they were just used as playing card games. Now, there is a big reference in history to the Leaf game that a princess of the Tang Dynasty wanted a playing card game, and essentially that's how cards were made or started to be looked into making. While this history is very, very far back, so it can't be like proven like to 100% exact, there's a bunch of references to this Leaf game that seems to be the first ever playing card game created. Now, later on in history, when we get to around the Egyptian area of the world, this is where we start seeing a actual playing card deck, where this history is essentially the earliest surviving deck of cards that we have found to this date, because like tarot in its mysterious nature, it has a mysterious history that's also lost. So the next actual deck of playing cards that we can look back on is the Mamluk cards. The Mamluk cards date back to the 12th and 13th century, and they were found, fragments of them were found in Egypt. And then a very similar design was also found that looked like these cards, were found in Istanbul in the 15th century. This Mamluk deck is essentially one of the first ever 52 card playing card decks that we can actually look back to, and it probably isn't the first one. Now, when I mentioned the lost history of tarot and the lost history in general of playing cards, we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of history that wiped out a lot of books and knowledge and information of the past. One of those great examples is when the Library of Alexandria burned down. The Library of Alexandria was a library in Alexandria, but it had an abundance amount of information. Now, I know some history nerds are gonna kind of come for me for this next sort of explanation of what this library was like and why it was so highly viewed, but the Library of Alexandria was a lot like Reddit. Stay with me, please. Reddit has a lot of useful information. It has a lot of opinions and reviews and different knowledge from different people all across the world. It also has its not so good information and not so good sides of Reddit. Library of Alexandria essentially was like this because they wanted to take in everyone's information. They wanted to treat this library not just as a book that you can check out of a normal library. It was not like that at all. It was a place where information could be written down and stored, regardless of it being a good take, a bad take, a hot take, or a cold take, you know? One fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, you know? It could have every bit of information you were looking for about the world in this library. And it was very welcomed to new information because I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe in my history, research and what I was learning about it in the past, there was a lot of encouragement around, hey, like, we want to know really everything about the world. We want a place that the whole entire world history, not even history, but knowledge was stored not just in one place, but it was welcomed to be stored in this one place. And over time, this is where a lot of occult like things and esoteric things start to enter this library. Over time, when this occult knowledge of like sacred geometry and Pythagoras and all of his like musical theories and things of that nature, there's a bunch of different occult and esoteric knowledge that started to be put in this library that people started to kind of lock away. They wanted to, put it behind closed doors, oh, you have to like know somebody to get this information, whatever it was. There was a lot of, over time, things kind of being put in very like the restricted section of the library, like in Hogwarts kind of a thing. It wasn't fully closed off from what I remember, but it was definitely like, hey, you need permission to go in here kind of a thing, to look into this stuff. There's a lot of different things going on around in the world during this time that the Library of Alexandria was just moving and grooving with all of its different knowledge. And I want to go back to the Tang Dynasty, because the Tang Dynasty was around from 618 CE to 907 CE. And the Library of Alexandria, if you don't know the history, it burnt down. It got destroyed and was a complete wreck, with all of that knowledge of history gone, lost to time. There was a lot of people trying to conquer Egypt, and around 642 CE is around when this library was destroyed. Now, this library actually went through like 2 wars per se. There were 2 battles like on the shores of Alexandria, and it survived the first one, and on the second one, it burnt to a crisp. A lot of people wanted to conquer Egypt at the time. This was a very heavily, like, we want to conquer this area part of history.
What's kind of funny and ironic to me about Egypt is that Egypt essentially wasn't originally Egypt. It was a colonized version of Kemet, Africa. Kemet is where Egypt gets a lot of its mythology and a bit of like culture from, was Kemet, Africa. And this essentially was colonized to become Egypt. So the fact that Egypt wanted to be conquered in the past is a little bit ironic. And I thought I'd just bring that up as like a little bit of history. And it's really interesting to look into bits of Kemet. But anyway, back to the video.
So, like, this history is important to understand the history of tarot, because a lot of things about that library have a lot of myths and legends surrounding it now. Like, there is a myth of Knight Templars smuggling information out, or people just smuggling information out of the library before it burnt down. And partially that part of the library was tarot. And some people have legends and beliefs and myths that they believe that tarot and the knowledge of tarot was smuggled out. Now, tarot wasn't fully tarot right from the beginning. Now, when we look at the Egyptian Mamluk cards, there's something very eerily similar, not so eerie, but there's something very familiar about the 52 playing card deck that was first found. Before we get to that next thing, I do want to mention that the Crusades that happened in history definitely played a big part in why a lot of history is lost. And you have places like Romania, before it was even like Romania, the Romani people used tarot and divination a lot in general. Now, we'll get to what divination really is, because we're just talking about playing cards here. The Romani people basically had divination down to a T. That was heavily within their history, and a lot of their history is just word of mouth, things that they passed down. So when I say this history is lost to time, like, it is truly, truly lost with all of the different battles and wars over time, and the Crusades really was a big part of lost history, because if you weren't following their faith, everything got burned. In the purifying energy of fire, they burned all of this history. Now, it wasn't the only people to burn history, but when we look back at that Mamluk deck, what is very familiar to the suits in the playing card decks, we're all familiar with the 4 different suits in a playing card deck. You have your suit of clubs, your suit of hearts, your suit of diamonds, and the suit of spades. But this is not what was depicted in the first fragments of a playing card deck that was first found. What we see in the Mamluk deck is a suit of wands that is associated, knownly as clubs. That's what they called it, was clubs. It was depicted with an actual wooden club that later became wands later in history. We see the suit of cups, which is also associated with the suit of hearts. Suit of cups has to do with a lot of things of emotion, so the fact that it turned into hearts is very on par, on brand. Then we see the suit of coins, which is associated with the suit of diamonds, and the suit of swords, which is associated with the suit of spades. Before the normal 52 card playing card deck, which is the clubs, hearts, diamonds, and spades, it was first still clubs. If you want to go back into history, it was still technically clubs, but it is now considered wands. It was then wands, cups, coins or pentacles, and swords. This is where tarot gets its format from. This is why tarot is very similar to a playing card deck. Now, tarot traditionally has 78 cards that are split into two arcana, the major arcana and the minor arcana. If you just separate the minor arcana is the four suits that we all know and love and are familiar with. The major arcana are other cards that came later and were essentially used in a playing card game as well, and they were called trump cards. These major arcana cards later turned into a story of human experience. These cards are used as a tool for divination now, but they were a playing card game, and some people have the idea, and there is the myth with the Knight Templars, like smuggling out that information or holding on to that information of the actual secrets of tarot and how to use it for enlightenment and stuff like that. They essentially, there's a myth around the Knight Templars where they created a playing card game in order to hide the information, the occult and esoteric information, which we kind of do see this happen in history of like where people want to hide something under the guise of, oh, it's just this little thing, it's not really anything serious, to kind of keep things more sacred to people who know how to use said cards. Now, this is where history does kind of get lost, and we'll talk about divination in a second, but when tarot became a playing card game and then later became a divination tool, the line between those two bits of history is so lost and so mysterious, but we can date things back as far back as when playing cards were invented. Now, when we get into divination and what divination is and how people use divination with cards, we have to go back to all bits of history of all over the world where people were trying to gain knowledge and interpret the will of the gods. This goes as far back as Mesopotamia, with the Sumerians, the Akkadians, and the Babylonians, all using different things, not cards, but astrology, or even like different cultures use smoke and flame to try and divinate and understand the will of God or the will of their gods that they believed in. Even back in a lot of Christianity history, there was different things like thunder and lightning that they used to interpret the will of the gods. I use heavy quotes on that because so many cultures all over the world throughout history, as far back as we can look, as far back as civilization can go in our history, this is something that all humans in all cultures were using. Divination was just a tool to understand and gain insight by supernatural means, per se. Now, the type of divination that people used around the world was all different. Some people, threw bones, some people casted runes, some people used astrology. And then somewhere along the way, some people used cartomancy. Cartomancy is divination with cards. It doesn't have to be tarot cards or playing cards. It could literally be like the community chest cards from a Monopoly game. This is where tarot and its divination practices kind of have a very muddled history. And I'm going to keep reminding you that a lot of this history is lost, and it makes it very confusing when they became a divination tool. A lot of the Romani people used tarot, but that history only goes so far back, and since a lot of their culture was passed down due to word of mouth, it's hard to confirm exactly how far back their history with tarot goes. But if you go to Google right now and say, where did tarot cards originate from, they're going to tell you somewhere around the 14 to 1500s of like Italy and France. And this is where we start seeing tarot as a divination tool. But this is also, conveniently enough, directly after the Crusades. The Crusades kind of tore through a bunch of things, probably found information, burned the rest of the information, and kept a lot of things for themselves. This is just common throughout history when it comes to a lot of religious wars, per se. Since there's no definitive answer of when tarot became a divination tool, I do want to talk about how it was a playing card game, because I think this playing card game can explain a lot about the history. There was even a small story of someone coming back from the Library of Alexandria and meeting some people playing a card game and recognizing, hey, I saw those images on the inside of this library. Like, there's so much myth surrounding it. But this playing card game, and the one playing card game that is associated with tarot that we can look back on, is a very complex game that has a very complex point system. Now, we're going to get into what my personal opinion, based off of all of this research that I've done, and how tarot became from a playing card game to a divination tool. I believe when people were playing the tarot card playing card game, that somewhere along the lines things started to look familiar or coincidental, per se. The first playing card game with tarot cards is called Tarocchini. I could be pronouncing that wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong. But this playing card game was very, very complex. This had a very, very complex point system where all of the major arcana, or all of the trump cards, were very, very specific in their points. And we look at the normal suits, like the suit of, wands, spades, hearts, all of that stuff. You are familiar with the Jack, Queen, and King. Before there was a Jack, there was the Page cards. There is technically 4 of these cards instead of the normal 3. These are called the court cards. So it goes Page, Knight, Queen, and then King. All of these cards were also used in this tarot game. All of these cards had sort of different points associated with them as well. The Knights were also essentially called Cavaliers, and then later turned into knights, because if you know anything about cavalry and what that is about, that is a lot to do with people being a knight or on a horseback. The knight cards in tarot are always someone depicted on a horse, or essentially in that knight cavalry sort of role. Now, in my theory, when people were playing this game, I feel like people were kind of picking up on people's personality, of how they would play it, or how certain cards would come out around certain people, and maybe started creating a little bit of a, I wonder what's going on here. Because the human mind is super curious, and we are going to try and understand something to its heart's content, to our heart's content, until the cows come home. Now, there could have been people already using tarot as a divination tool during this time. That's 100% possible. But we can't fully confirm that, but it's a bit mixed. Like I said, a lot of the history is lost. So I want you to kind of imagine a game, whether it's with cards, like a standard playing card deck, or a game like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, or even, hell, Monopoly, like we mentioned earlier. Have you ever played a board game with somebody and you can kind of pick up on their personality, of like the kind of person that they are, just by how they play the game? That's kind of how I believe people picked up on things with the tarot playing card game. Because one silly little thing, I just, when before I was like going to actually make this video, I was kind of trying to structure how I would put my personal opinion out here, because this is mainly my personal opinion based off of the research that I've done. I asked my boyfriend and his friends because they play Magic the Gathering. I have learned Magic the Gathering through playing with them, and they have talked so much about different types of decks that they build or different types of decks that other people build. And one day when I was thinking about making this video, I was asking them, hey, could you pick up on the type of person or someone's personality based off of the deck that they choose to play and or build? And they were like, oh yeah, 100%, like I could totally like pick up on someone's like personality off of that. And that gave me a key sort of feeling that I couldn't explain, but somewhere along the lines, if people were playing this tarot card game, they would have wanted to ask some questions about these cards, wouldn't they? And when it comes to lost history and only certain people kind of knowing history due to them surviving after this history being burnt to the ground or, casted away because they weren't a part of the right faith, this history has to have some people asking questions about this playing card game, doesn't it? That's what makes me super curious the most, is maybe there were people recognizing, hey, this card keeps coming out for this person, and that card, just by like the imagery, or let's say you have a card that is called the Chariot. The Chariot card is literally someone in a chariot moving forward, and this can be seen just as like the picture shows as someone moving forward. In what? Not sure. Let's say someone's playing this tarot card game and they see someone gets this Chariot card, but they know that person is always a go-getter. Like they always go after things that they want to try or want to pursue, and they're really passionate about their life and wanting to go different places or do different things. They are a go-getter. That is essentially the energy of the Chariot card when it comes to what we know now in this modern day time of the Chariot card. And I feel like that makes a lot of sense regardless of where tarot like first became a divination tool, because we can't really associate that with like the origins of tarot, because we have to go back to the origins of the cards and the origins of divination, because divination goes all the way back to Mesopotamia. So when I see tarot being played as a playing card game, I know for sure some people had some questions, because how could you not? If you see certain cards coming out at the same time for certain people, and they probably like in a little coincidental way was like, oh yeah, this card, the Chariot, I'm totally a Chariot, and like someone joking about like, I'm so this card kind of a thing. In human nature and human history, I feel like this curiosity would have been explored. And during this time, there were people reading tarot as a divination tool, but in secret. These things were very secretive and held back because, like we all know with the Crusades and even the Salem witch trials, if you were even like looked at weirdly and accused of they're doing something supernatural, you were casted away, burnt at the stake, whatever they thought. And a lot of this time people weren't even like practicing witchcraft in the Salem witch trials. When you go back to that history, a lot of those victims were not practicing witchcraft at all. They were either practicing herbalism, or some people wanted to get away from their abusive husbands, or they were just associated with certain people. And some people can just look at someone and be like, I don't like you and I want you gone. And a lot of that happened. A lot of that history of the witch trials is very dark, and if you want to look into it, you can. I implore you to understand that they weren't really all witches. There really weren't any witches in the witch trials. So this is something that not only is it lost and mysterious, it is secretive. The history of tarot was very kept in behind closed doors and in sort of secret societies, we can say. I'm not going to say secret societies on a grand scale. This is just like someone's grandma knows how to read tarot back in Italy of the 14th century, and they just have these different ways of like talking about it and keeping it to their own family and in their own bloodline if people wanted to learn it. Because in around this time in history, and a lot of medieval and Renaissance history, there is astrologers being asked by kings and queen, by noble and royal people, hey, astrologer, can you interpret the stars to see how my kingdom, how I will rule over my kingdom, or how I should rule over my kingdom, or what's going to happen? The tool of divination has been used throughout history. So I hope this can kind of explain the history of tarot and sort of where it kind of flipped on its head to become a divination tool.
This is a great time to mention the most world renowned popular deck, the Rider Waite deck, or also known as the Rider Waite Smith deck. Now, you may not know this tarot deck by name, but you've definitely seen these images somewhere. And this essentially originally was called the Rider Waite Smith deck, originally published in 1909 by William Rider and Son, and commissioned by Arthur Edward Waite, and illustrated by Pamela Colman Smith. Now, Smith was very important and almost lost to the entire tarot history of this deck entirely if it wasn't for the little signature that she put in all of the illustrations for each and one of every of the tarot cards. And this is very important to acknowledge because not only was she almost lost in history, she was almost entirely forgotten on the financial aspect. Like, she did not make much money off of this, but she illustrated every single card. And by the time hundreds were sold, she only received a small fee for her work, and that was pretty much it. And she has coined the most popular imagery of every tarot deck ever. Now, this was something that was entirely her own doing. Arthur Edward Waite had a lot of conceptual ideas about the cards, but all of the illustrations were her own making. And this had to do a lot with the fact that Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Colman Smith were a part of the same occultist society, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Now, this was a secret occultist society which borrowed ideas from the Kabbalah and Freemasonry for its own spiritual belief system, centered on magic and metaphysics. The history behind this tarot deck is very intriguing, and I highly encourage you go do your own research upon it, because my video isn't really here to talk about the most popular tarot decks. I'm really here to connect the dots of the lost history of tarot, because I feel like it's something I don't see people talk about when it comes to people explaining the history of tarot and where it came from and what it was, because people really only talk about what Google will show you, and Google will show you a lot of the, hey, it was found in the 1400s, 1500s of like Italy. And while that is true, I don't think that's where it originally came from, because it came from so many other things before that. It was seen in Egypt before that, not specifically a tarot deck, but the imagery was seen way before that. So I'm here to kind of connect those dots all the way back to the 9th century of when playing cards were invented, all the way up to it being a popular divination tool. So I hope that helps explain this video a little bit more.
Because at this point, this is where we get into what tarot is used for and the divination practices and how people use it. Now, I mentioned cartomancy is a form of divination, that you could use the community chest cards in Monopoly as a form of divination. Now, when we get to tarot, like I said, is like a playing card deck, where it is a structure. There is a specific structure to this deck that is going to go across every single tarot deck ever. This tarot deck has the same amount of cards as this tarot deck. Sometimes tarot decks will add one more card than usual. Like, I have a couple tarot card decks that the major arcana, those trump cards, have like an extra card that the author wanted to throw in there, right? Unfortunately, the loaf has left us. But anyway, I digress. Some tarot decks have a little bit of an extra card thrown in there. See, this tarot deck I have here has the same structure that this tarot deck has. This tarot deck does not have any extra cards. It just has all the major arcana, all the minor arcana, but it also has an extra card called the unknown card, and it doesn't even have a number on it. So sometimes the authors of certain tarot card decks can really have their own little creative twist with it. But when it comes to tarot, tarot specifically has a structure. Now, when we get to oracle cards do not have a specific structure. There is not one way that an oracle deck is created all across all of oracle decks. I have an oracle deck here that is circles, mind you, but also I believe this has about like 60 to 70 cards in it, maybe a little more. I just realized the last card in this oracle deck, I believe, is 78. I believe L is 50, and then plus 20 gets 70, 78 here. So while this may be actually similar to the amount of cards like a tarot card deck, these cards are not structured like the tarot at all. These have their own meanings, their own places, and their own sort of order when it goes from 1 to 78. And like tarot, this essentially has a 78th card. Tarot has a card that starts at 0. So when we get to the major arcana, we'll talk about how it goes from 0 to 21. So there's technically 22. While that deck has 78 cards in its oracle deck, this one has 64, I believe, or 65. This is my Sacred Geometry Oracle, and it is literally all sacred geometry things. Like, there's so many different types of sacred geometry that is shown in this, and it's its own thing and has its own quote-unquote structure to it. Oracle cards are going to have their own structure. They may not call themselves oracle cards, but anything that it doesn't have a structure like tarot is essentially going to be looked at as an oracle deck. And now the difference, and this is what's going to get us into the major arcana of tarot and how people kind of read into it, is oracles are mainly for advice. If you're looking for advice, it's going to give you advice. Tarot can do the same thing, but what tarot can do is tell a story. Now, disclaimer here, tarot isn't going to be a set in stone sort of destiny kind of like reading. Some people will read into things and be like, this is exactly what's going to happen. But a lot of things when it comes to tarot reading and the reading that you get is only ever going to be as good as the tarot reader. This is where we get a lot of scammers in the community. Tarot community has a slew of amount of people trying to say all of this, what we call woo-woo manipulative stuff that can throw people off and make people feel like, I don't really feel like I got an answer out of what I should do in my life. Tarot is like a personal future insight calculator, and we're going to call it a future insight calculator because we can put in certain situations, this situation plus that minus this, and get a possible outcome is essentially what the answer, what is after the equal sign. What this math equals up to is what could possibly happen. And a good example for this is when people look into it, like let's say you're not sure if you should leave your job or go on into a new job or try and get a higher position and quote unquote climb the ladder in your current job. You can look at the tarot and ask it, what will my life look like if I choose path A versus path B? Path A being going and leaving and getting a new job and a higher pay, or path B trying to get higher pay within this current workplace. This is how tarot is truly used, because tarot has acknowledgments of free will. Like, it can talk about things and talk about people's feelings and really get an insight of how people are feeling on the inside and tell a story through that. And it's not just any sort of fake story, it is like the story that the cards are telling. But when it comes to someone's own free will, we get this a lot in love readings, where some people who are very woo-woo and manipulative in how they do readings will basically tell you all sorts of things about your love life and, hey, this person's the one, but they're super afraid to come forward, but they're really the one for you. Like, they have all of these feelings towards you. And someone could have a lot of feelings towards you, but that doesn't really hold up to their actual actions. And sometimes there's a lot of different ways that people could have feelings about you, because some of them may not all be positive, some of them may not all be in love and light per se. Like someone could have a lot of feelings of being with you in a love reading, but it could all be out of a lot of manipulative energy and how they want to maybe hold you down and things of that nature. A lot of readers who are just scammers won't really get into the details of this. And I will say, if you are getting a tarot read and you leave that reading with more questions than answers, I'm going to allow you to trust your gut and say that wasn't really a good reading. If you want to give that reader feedback, you can. If they're open to that, tell them that. Like, feel like you can speak on that, or even have your own discernment of your life doesn't have to be controlled by a tarot reading. And legally, tarot reading on a legal standpoint in the United States is just an entertainment thing. It is legally all for entertainment. We cannot sit here and say we can diagnose you, or, say this is going to hold up in court kind of a thing. This is something that is purely just for entertainment. And like any other thing of entertainment, you pay some concert company, you pay them the amount of money for a ticket to like a Billie Eilish concert or like a Def Leppard concert, whatever it may be. It's very two different spectrums of music I just mentioned, I just realized. But this is where I want to have all of this disclaimer before we talk about how people even read these cards and the story that tarot tells. And to start off with the story, we get to talk about everyone's favorite card, the Fool card. The Fool card, while people can joke about, oh my god, I'm such a fool, the Fool card is called the Fool to acknowledge naivety and innocence in a way. Because the Fool card in tarot is really to represent us as human beings. This is the first card of the major arcana, technically. Even though it has the number of 0, it is technically supposed to represent this new blank slate. And the Fool card goes through a whole entire journey through the major arcana in the tarot. This is called the Fool's Journey. The Fool's Journey talks about a journey through human experience. And when I mean about human experience, I mean things that we have all been through. Every single one of us has been 3 years old. Every single one of us has turned double digits for the first time. Every single one of us first became a teenager and went through puberty and all that stuff. Each and every one of us at some point, regardless of your age, whether you're an adult or not, is going to become an adult. Like, these are stages in our lives that are definite and that are going to happen. And this is something that we all go through different things. And it kind of goes into, when it gets to the human experience, it talks about things like if you were hearing a friend talk about a bad experience that they had with somebody, and you can say, oh my god, I went through something similar too. And it was with a different person in a different environment, but it was the same type of thing. Like how a big talk when it comes to a lot of mental health things is either a lot of people talking nowadays in 2025 about narcissism and how that can play out in different ways. These different ways of how different people have dealt with narcissism or narcissistic tendencies or narcissistic sort of people in their lives, we all have similar stories to how those people kind of act. Or even people who are truly kind and truly sweet, and when people talk about other people like, hey, oh, that person couldn't hurt a fly. We've all met people like that, but in different ways and in different environments, and had different sort of stories that we have when interacting with those people. All of these add up to different experiences that the major arcana specifically talks about in tarot. And this journey that the Fool goes on is very similar to the hero's journey, if you've ever heard of the hero's journey story before, which is also associated to a lot of Greek mythology when it comes to Odysseus. Odysseus went on a hero's journey, and he came back and was able to be anew and live again, essentially. And a lot of people associate the Fool's Journey with a lot of that Greek mythology of Odysseus because because of his hero's journey being so very similar to the fool's journey. And we can kind of look back on that tarot history and say that's probably where it came from, but also we can look back on Nordic history and the Hanged Man card. If anyone is familiar with Norse mythology, you will remember the story of Odin hanging himself off of the Yggdrasil tree. I think I'm saying that right. I feel like I can never pronounce it right. The Yggdrasil tree. Yeah, hold on. The Yggdrasil tree. Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil. God, that word is so hard for me, I swear. But Odin hung himself by the foot, essentially, from this tree to gain knowledge. That is a big part of his story, and it's the reason why he lost an eye. He sacrificed his eye, essentially. Sacrificed, heavy quotes on that if you know the actual story, because it's like a part of him was sacrificed to gain this knowledge from the world tree. Now, when it comes to the Hangman card is literally all about gaining new perspectives. So much so that the person in the card put themselves upside down to think, to gain a literal new perspective of looking at things upside down. And this is where we see this story of Norse mythology very much correlate to the tarot cards. And some people even look at the tarot and say this is where a lot of the Norse mythology kind of gained their information of tarot per se. I put heavy quotes on that because a lot of their runes that they have really associate with some tarot cards as well. But just like Odin, this person in this card has literally an upside down perspective of the world. And to gain a new perspective, you have to let go of an old one. You have to sacrifice an old one. So these stories associate a lot in the major arcana with different cards and in different mythologies and even just different human experiences that we've had. But this is the journey that the Fool goes on. He encounters each and every one of these cards and the people in these cards that are depicted in the cards. And this is a huge structure to how people read tarot, because this storytelling structure is not just only in the major arcana, it's in each suit of the minor arcana. And when we get back to the court cards of the page, knight, queen, and king, those are different stages of maturity that are shown and in different energies per se. When we talk about different stages of maturity, we can also use that as a sort of blanket term kind of metaphor for different maturity levels in like a specific task or skill. Like some people are really mature in a specific skill and some people are starting like brand new, like fresh out of the gate with something. And that perspective of starting fresh is the page card or the jack suit per se. Suit, I don't know why I mentioned it by suit, but so the page card is like someone starting fresh. They know everything about the book, but they don't have the experience. And when we move on to the knight card, this is someone who is just now really gaining the knowledge of experience, but wanting to hone in their skills a bit more. The queen is someone who is truly experienced, truly knowledgeable, and wanting to master their craft. And the king is the master of them all. They are the expert on things, on that maturity level sort of scale. This is all depicted in different ways in each one of the suits in the minor arcana: the swords, the wands, the cups, and the pentacles or coins. Now, I can go in deeper into the stories of each minor arcana suit and the story that it tells, but we'll just kind of start with an example with the Ace of Wands. The Ace of Wands is all about ideas and how we want to conjure up this idea and actually pursue action over it. If we're just talking about the idea and thinking all of the thoughts around this idea, that is a lot of the suit of swords, and this is associated with a different all the major arcana associated with elements. So the swords is air, kind of, oh, this idea is just up in the air right now. That's a good way to kind of think about it. And the wands are associated with fire, so the fiery passion we have to take action on something. And it starts with an idea, the fiery one, the passionate one. But with this idea, we have to plan accordingly. This is what the Two of Wands really talks about. And after we've done planning things, after we're complete with and comfortable with our plan, we have to start building. We have to start actually following this plan and building the blueprints off of this plan. This is where the Three of Wands kind of comes into. Now, the Four of Wands can obviously talk about a lot of happiness, and you can see these people are very happily getting married or dancing in this card, but it talks about building a solid structure and actually creating something that's stable. So the plan that you've gone after and created and built is something that can have a lot of stability towards it, and that's usually what this card talks about, but depending on what other cards come out with this can really determine what kind of stability this talks about. Or it can talk about instability and moving on to creating more stability, because when we talk about the Four Wands, it's really just like the four corners of a house, or marking the 4 points of where we're going to build this house, this actual structured building here, in a very metaphorical way. And when we move on, we can kind of see the chaos of life. Five of Wands is a lot about chaos, and I see it as, a lot of people see it as competition, but not competition with like just marketing things. This could be competitive ideas clashing with each other and uncertain of how to do this. But we have to trust in ourselves that we know that the idea that we have and hold is the one that is true and stable for us. This is also can be explained in a deeper sense when I actually make a video about the minor arcana. The Six of Wands is a lot about recognition. We can recognize our idea is a good one in that we are confident in ourselves, recognizing ourselves or other people recognizing us. And this is where it leads to the Seven of Wands, where the Seven of Wands is a lot of like, hey, there are other people who have ideas. They may be kind and great, and those ideas could be good, and they may not be great for you and what you want to do, but all of these clashing ideas that were from the Five of Wands are trying to make their way to you and trying to get you to be like, hey, consider this, consider that, or have you considered this? Whether it's good or bad and how someone's saying it, all of these things are people trying to say, hey, this is good for you, that's good for you. The Seven of Wands says, you have your own idea. You have your own Ace of Wands here. You have your own passionate plan on something that you know and recognize that works for you. So you must move forward in what you know. This is where we get an abundance of ideas for ourselves, where we can choose within this one wand, we can choose to work out this idea in a multitude of ways. And this is where, when we get a lot of rushing ideas, we kind of have to remind ourselves we can't do all of these ideas at once. The Nine of Wands, after the Eight of Wands, the Nine of Wands talks about reconciliation, and we can reconcile within ourselves to explore what's good, what's bad, what can we do, like combine 2 things into one idea, kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone sort of metaphor. And then when it comes to the Ten of Wands, this is a very, very heavy card. You can obviously see that this person is struggling to hold all of this. The point of the Ten of Wands is that all of these ideas that you have gathered, all of this planning, all of this passionate, fiery work you've been doing is going to have to be put down, as in a physical building of something. The Ten of Wands can be like you holding on to ideas too much, or it can acknowledge the responsibility of, if you have big dreams, you're gonna have to have big responsibilities. That when you put all of these ideas together, each and every single wand is going to be put down at some point, to where you're left just pursuing the one idea that you were pursuing. It's kind of like making sure your laundry's done and your dishes are clean, sort of responsibilities. And then this leads into the Page, the Knight, the Queen, and the King, and that stage of maturity, those stages of maturity. Now, each suit has a similar story like this, and I can go more in depth into it. That was just my best at trying to keep it short and sweet. But this is how tarot is read. Each card tells a story. And when we combine different cards with other cards, we can kind of, as tarot readers, read into that story. Now, when it comes to actually reading the tarot cards, you're gonna hear this word intuition thrown out a lot. Yes, we read with intuition, but what is intuition? Well, I'll have to save exactly what intuition is at a deeper level in another video. Intuition is exactly what people describe as that gut feeling. Have you ever felt like you just had to do something, you couldn't explain it, but you had to do something, and then random domino effect later, things work out? And things actually work out better than you had hoped, and not even better like things are all great sunshine and rainbows, but like they worked out in a way where you weren't sure if you were going to get something done, and you knew you had to go do another task. You had to go do that task. You just have to go do it, right? And then later in the day, you realize that the task you weren't sure you were going to get done actually is lining up perfectly to get 2 tasks done, that one included, in one sort of path. And the way I can explain this is kind of what I experienced yesterday before filming this. Was I DoorDash a bit here and there to kind of make a little extra money. And when I was DoorDashing, I kept saying to myself, I don't know when I'm going to be able to handle this sort of mailbox that I'd set up at a UPS store, because I was closing it out because I just wanted to save some money as well, because me and my boyfriend are moving currently. So also this background may definitely change in the future. But as I was going on the DoorDash, I was sitting here thinking, like, I just have to do the DoorDash. Like, I scheduled this because sometimes with DoorDashing you have to schedule a spot, and I was like, okay, I just have to go do this. By the time I finished up my dashing, I don't really know the area where I live too well because I am in the Midwest, but I am originally from the East Coast, and I've only been in the Midwest for like about almost 3 years now. It's mainly 2 full years, but it's like coming up on 3. So I don't know the area fully too well. So when I stopped for gas after finishing my dash, I was checking in with my boyfriend. I was trying to tell him where I'm at, and then I was looking at the map to like go and actually get food because I basically hadn't eaten lunch, and I wanted to get food after my dash. I'm getting gas, and then I realized that the place that I had set up the mailbox was actually on the way to where my lunch was, and it was on the same road that I was getting gas at, because the place I wanted to get lunch at essentially was directly next to this UPS store, and on that same road was where I was getting gas. It was just maybe like 7 minutes down the road, kind of a deal. And I was kind of like, oh wow, like it all worked out. But I didn't know that. I just kind of said, well, I know what I have to do. And that's kind of where we get these gut feelings where we can't fully explain it, but it's just something we have to do, that we're like, it'll work out. We feel like we have to do something and we just do it. Now, this is very separate from our ego because it's not things that we want to do. It could be things that we want to do and want to get done. But when we get a gut feeling, like you get a gut feeling about a person and they have an off vibe, and then you hear like 5 months later that they did someone dirty, like a coworker or a friend of yours, that they did them dirty, but your gut feeling was telling you the whole time something's off with this person, that's intuition. It's nothing based out of the ego. It is just a clear, I'm feeling something about this and I can't explain it. A lot of people who read tarot kind of have this sort of psychic ability, and we can get into psychic abilities in another video if we want to, but this is where it leads into this very spiritual aspect of intuition is something you practice at. Anyone can really be good at it, and I'm pretty sure that you've met people or know people who are very intuitive and use their instinct and their gut feeling to a T, and they're not spiritual at all. My dad is very instinctive and intuitive, and he's not really a religious or spiritual guy at all, but he's very intuitive, and it's little things, like I've heard him say, yeah, I just didn't feel like doing that, and then this happened today and I was actually able to like get this done and do that, so it all worked out. Like, he's told me that sort of thing like so many different times in my life, and it's something that we practice at because we have to trust ourselves, and we can't just sit there and say, oh well, I know the tarot reading based off of the meaning of the cards. You can look into it that way, but when a tarot reader says take what resonates, leave what doesn't, you could hear the entire in-depth meaning of each card in a 3-card reading, and you have different parts that resonate for you in the sense of, yes, that actually feels like what's going on, and different parts that don't when it comes to the deeper meanings. That is the whole point of taking what resonates and leaving what doesn't. The intuition part kind of skips past all of the things that don't resonate and goes to the heart of the matter and the heart of the energy of the card. Now, when we really talk about how people use intuition with their tarot cards and their tarot divination, each person's different. Like I said, the tarot reading that you get is only ever going to be as good as the reader. And even sometimes some beginners who are just trying to collectively send out all of the info of like, hey, this is what this card means, they can still have a feeling of, hey, I'm kind of getting this feeling from this card specifically. Excuse me. Now, getting into the deeper tarot reads that really go in depth, this is when a reader has really done their knowledge and research on the tarot cards and has continued to practice. Not just the practicing tarot reading, but practicing their own intuition and trusting their own intuition. Because as every good tarot reader knows, you are never done learning tarot. There's always something new that we can see in the cards, and especially when we get to a now more modern day, since this goes back as far as Egypt times, this essentially can have newer modern meanings, not just a brand new meaning coming out of thin air, but this is where it's newer modern things that associate a lot of more to the modern day. One card that I see a lot, which is the Page of Swords, can be seen as a lot of like looking online or looking into a mirror or looking at something, and it's very has been seen as this like looking at things online because of the sword. And if a sword is really super shiny, it can reflect different things, kind of like how our phone has a reflection in that shiny part of the screen. There's a lot of different modern twists I see with different tarot cards, but also it doesn't stray from the like true deep meaning of the card. And I remember hearing someone say, well, are there different possibilities? Does each card have a specific meaning, or are there just infinite possibilities of meanings for each card and it doesn't really matter what card comes out? When it comes to that question that I had someone ask me, each card, it's kind of both, because each card has their set meaning, but it can have an infinite amount of possibilities of what we go through in our lives in that specific meaning. So let's say you want to build something for your future, you want to build your career. That's the Three of Wands. The Three of Wands talks a lot about building things and going with a plan that you had and really setting things up to bring in something. Because when we are building something, we either want to like build a house to bring in the energy of making it a home or bring in the energy of family. We set the table to bring in the energy of people eating around the table. This is how it can be in different sort of scenarios, but all under the same meaning. And someone was kind of like a little confused when I was trying to explain it to them, but it was within like texts and like texting or something like that, so it was a little hard to explain like in a paragraph, because I feel like I can explain things better verbally, which is why I'm making this video. And then I also had someone ask the question of, is there proof that tarot works? Like, is there a definitive proof that this essentially is true or is accurate? And that's a really hard question to ask, because it falls in line with my belief of a tarot reading is only going to be as good as the reader. And it's kind of like, if you know someone is going to go down a not so good path and you can see intuitively, not even intuitively, but like you know the person and you're like, well, if they get into this, it's all downhill from here. This is essentially the area of, if you do a reading on that person and see that, yes, that is the bad path and what could possibly be the outcome of this path, like the future calculator I said this was. But if you look into, hey, if they actually changed their path and did this for good, what would change? What would be the outcome? You can get that reading, but at the same time, you can still see how someone may not choose that. They could want better for themselves, but they may not actually choose better, and you could see through you possibly knowing the person that they're probably not going to choose the better path. And that is a very like kind of harsh example, but when it comes to things being accurate, that's kind of as accurate as tarot can get. But at the same time, the reading is only going to be as good as the reader, so it's kind of hard to answer that one question that someone asked me, but I thought I would include it in this video just to kind of give you a little more sense of how these readings work. And like I said before, and legally, tarot is just entertainment. This is not any sort of medical diagnosis. This is not a set in stone, destined thing, because destiny and fate are really all up to personal opinion at that point. I kind of somewhat believe in destiny and fate, but I also believe people have the free will to not follow what they are destined for, what their purpose is, and what fate wants them to do, type of a thing. I still believe in that free will, that we can go off the beaten path of what is meant to be for us in our lives. Now, other people believe that even if they do get a reading, that's fate, that's destined. It's kind of up to personal opinion. I and most readers really don't see tarot as fully set in stone, because we know with human psychology and human nature that people change every month, every year, every 5 years. People change, and people will change their actions accordingly, whether for good, whether for bad. So it's hard to really convince people and say this is accurate and this works, because if they go to any reader and that reader ends up not being that really good of a reader and not fully honest with their reading, it's not going to be accurate. That's plain and simple. But someone who's been really in depth into the world of tarot and is consistently studying it, I am a personal advocate for readers who are consistently studying, because there is no end to this research in sight. That essentially is what's going to get you a more accurate reading. But whenever you get a reading, or even if you're reading for yourself, just use your own discernment. A big part of intuition and wisdom in all of this and in ourselves is discernment, because we could get a reading, and there's days where I will have so much going on in my personal life that I'm like, I can't read this accurately, or I can't read myself accurately, and I will know that my brain will want to conjure up a bunch of biased sort of information, and I sit there and I say, you know what, I literally one day had my boyfriend read the meanings of the cards. I pulled the cards out, and I did the physical part of the reading. But I was like, boyfriend, I am so clouded in my head right now. There's a lot going on. I know I need to calm down, but I also know I need this reading. So I want you to use your intuition as well. And that actually worked a lot better than I expected. And it very much helped me kind of see through and clear the fog in my mind. Because sometimes we are human. We have things happen to us that aren't perfect. And every reader ever is going to be still human on the inside. They're not some perfect saint or angel that's going to come and bless you with the exact knowledge you need in the moment. It's weird to say that we're people too, but it's essentially why we choose to read tarot cards. There's always something that we can learn personally about ourselves through the reading. And there's a lot of different ways to read cards. A lot of people do a lot of readings to understand who's reaching out, and those are very experienced tarot readers, which is something that I really am hoping to kind of master my skills towards. But that is a lot of deity work and understanding deity associations, and that is more psychic ability stuff. So we can talk about that stuff in another video, but I feel like I've yapped y'all's heads off enough about this tarot nonsense. If you have any more questions, please leave them in the comments. If you just want to bring your personal opinion about tarot, please be respectful, even if you do not agree with me and do not agree with just tarot in general. I do not mind having people that don't really like tarot talk to me about their opinions on it. I kind of want to hear your perspective, and sometimes it makes sense. It's kind of like how some people who believe in a certain religion can talk to people who are atheist and things of that nature. So please just be respectful in the comments, and also if you want to correct me for anything that I may have misspoken on, because there's a lot of information I tried to kind of put in this video, please respectfully correct me in the comments. I do not mind criticism. That's kind of how we learn. The next video I want to make is actually for people who want to really learn more about tarot, and if you have a tarot deck that you're you're wanting to learn more about. The next video I want to get into is talking about the Fool's Journey, and we are going to talk about the entire Fool's Journey and different interpretations of each and every little part of the journey. Not really super different interpretations, but how different people kind of word it in different ways. There's one book that I really love that I will discuss in that video that kind of tells it almost like a children's story is what it reminds me of, but it's obviously has a lot more sort of mature concepts in there. Not necessarily not for kids, but more mature in that sense, you know? So without further ado, I want to thank you for watching this video, and like I said, please like, comment, share, subscribe, whatever you want to do. And if you want more educational tarot videos from me, I am more than happy to talk and yap your head off about tarot. This is one of my passions, regardless of where it takes me. I just absolutely love, and I'm so passionate about learning tarot and exploring tarot with other people. I find it super, super cool, and I'm super nerdy about it as well. So if you want to just talk to me about tarot, I am always going to be live on Twitch every Tuesday. I do Tarot Tuesdays live on my Twitch channel, so if you want to get a free card reading, most of the time we'll be doing free one card. It doesn't really matter if you have a question or not, but we do kind of free one card readings, and then I can still do paid readings as well on my channel if you want. If you want to book a reading, the website should be down below and all of that fun stuff. But thank you for watching, and as always, I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.